The author, criminal defense attorney Sara Azari, her new book, Unprecedented, A Simple Guide to the Crimes of the Trump Campaign and Presidency, will be out in March. Let's talk about Harvey Weinstein first. What did you make of that?
Well, look, Weinstein was facing the two more serious counts of predatory sexual assault, which required a pattern of assaultive behavior. He was found not guilty on those. Those were the life counts that he was facing. He's found guilty of criminal sexual act, which is a first-degree sexual offense in New York. He's facing 5 to 25 years on that.
That was oral sex, right?
That was the oral copulation involving a victim named Mimi Haley. And then with the second victim, Jessica Mann, the jury did not believe that she was forcibly raped, but they believed that she was raped in the sense that there was no consent. So on that count, which is a third-degree crime, he's facing anywhere from probation to 4 years. But Larry, as a criminal defense attorney, the Harvey Weinstein verdict sets a very dangerous precedent, in my opinion. And that is that we now have a completely different definition of consent, a very murky one, especially in relationships involving these power dynamics, as in the Me Too movement. And we have now entered an era where we not only believe the victims, the women, but we believe them with no corroboration, with no immediate reporting, with no physical evidence. I mean, these are both victims who had problems with their testimony. Their testimony was challenged, their credibility was challenged, and yet the verdict was guilty, and there were 7 men on the jury. So these are different times, and it's, to me, dangerous for people's fundamental rights who can be accused of rape decades later.
Sara, what are your thoughts about the Me Too movement?
Look, as a woman, I support any movement that gives women a voice, that provides for equality, protects women. These are all positives about the Me Too movement. But for all of these 1,000,001 positives, if there's one negative, which is an individual's fundamental constitutional rights could be at issue and violated because we're going to simply believe allegations with no corroboration, that is so dangerous to me that I don't support any movement that does that. What I do for a living is I uphold people's constitutional rights. So, you know, that's the problem I have with the Me Too movement, is that this pendulum has struck so far to one side that it's going to take some time for us to get back in the middle.
Harvey Weinstein faces trials in California. You think the New York judgment against him will turn over and carry over to California?
Absolutely. He's now a convicted felon, and he's convicted of the same type of crime that he's going to be tried on in California. He's facing, I believe, 28 years on the charges here. From my understanding, there's also another 2 victims here. One of those victims was a prior bad act witness in the New York trial. And so, you know, even though he's facing a maximum of 25 years in New York, I think his exposure is far greater here in California, and these sentences could potentially run consecutively because they're in 2 different states.
All right, another area. Mike Bloomberg announced that 3 women believed to have accused him of sexist comments to be released from non-disclosure agreements. What will that mean?
Well, look, non-disclosure agreements now in most states don't have the same enforceability that they used to have. And Bloomberg's, of course, running for as a Democratic candidate for presidency in 2020. But we have a sitting president who has had multiple accusations of sexual misconduct, subject to hush money payments, subject to NDAs. And so I don't think that you know, anyone should be surprised that, you know, presidential candidate might have these types of allegations pending against him. But I do believe that NDAs don't carry the same type of protection that they used to, especially in light of this Me Too movement.
What did you make of the Roger Stone request for a new trial?
Okay, that was complete fugazi. I think Judge Amy Berman Jackson is set in stone, no pun intended. She's not going anywhere. Title 28 of the federal code says that a judge has to recuse himself or herself where there's a conflict of interest or there's bias. Now, bias means that the judge made some kind of an out-of-court, out-of-proceeding statement with respect to one side or the other, one party or the other. There is no such a thing here. This judge made a statement based on her own observations during the trial that the verdict acted with integrity. This is her opinion. She's entitled to make a record of it. This does not indicate any sort of bias. So basically, Larry, Stone is shopping for a new judge so that he can bring his motion for a new trial.
And if, as a criminal defense lawyer, wouldn't you back him on that?
I mean, I would not abuse the court system and the court docket. I think this is such a frivolous claim that he's making. I would save my ammunition for this motion for a new trial. I mean, making a motion where there's no bias to recuse the judge, I think, sort of makes him lose credibility.
Back to your book, Unprecedented, a word that seems to be applied to some aspect of the Trump organization. There's never been anything like this. So there is no precedent.
There is no precedent, but I think that, we were speaking off the record. I think what I wrote about that was unprecedented last summer is now a precedent because the president, the day after Mueller testified before Congress, picked up the phone and began the scheme with Ukraine. So this is now part of the Trump playbook.
What do you make of what's going on overall? The whole Bollywood, the politics, the courts?
Well, I think what struck me the most is this past week, the president went on this pardon spree or clemency spree, and he commuted the sentence of Blago. He pardoned people like Milken.
Well, Milken deserved it. He's devoted his life to curing prostate cancer.
Well, I'll give you that one. But he also pardoned the former New York police commissioner. When you look at the big picture, these are men that Trump relates to. They are all people who are white-collar fraudsters who have committed bribery, have committed corruption. They've abused their power in some shape or form for personal gain. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that they deserve the clemency and that this clemency is issued on the eve of Stone's sentencing. I think if this is not a hint as to what the president is going to do for Stone in terms of commuting his sentence or pardoning his conviction, I don't think what would be.
When you are pardoned, does that return your right to vote?
Yes.
Right to citizenship?
It's as though you never committed the crime.
What is the difference between pardon and commutation?
Well, the commutation is when you're serving a sentence and by executive power, the president cuts short your sentence and orders your release, which is what happened with Blago. Right. And the pardon is where you may have already served the sentence. You are pardoned from that conviction. And the pardon actually can happen at any time. It can be after a conviction. It can be upon accusation. It can come at any time. But ultimately, I think, Stone was the closest link to the president in the 2016 election interference. He was the connection between the dumps from Assange and the president's knowledge and solicitation of those emails. So I absolutely think that what the president did last week is a message to all of us that Stone deserves some kind of clemency.
Sara, as always, thanks for your time today. You're an intriguing guest.